the reality is this, and this is the North Star that I believe people should have, which is unless you have one Bitcoin, a minimum of one Bitcoin, your job is not done.
I wouldn't say you're early anymore at this point. Like, you are on the verge of this thing going completely parabolic, because the most powerful government on the face of the planet on July 22nd might announce that it has bought Bitcoin.
Until Wall Street has their hands around something in a way to make money selling it, they don't promote it.
I think Wall Street is just about figuring its way out, figuring out how to actually sink its teeth into Bitcoin. And once they do that, this is going to be like real estate in the 70s, right? When they figured out mortgage-backed securities, that's when real estate really took off.
I don't think you'll have this opportunity 4 years from now. I think the window will be closed. Try to get just one. You're going to be in the global elite.
All right, guys, this is another Byte Federal podcast, and I'm joined today by British Hodl and none other than Nico Moran from Simply Bitcoin. Love to have you guys on the show. It's been, I've been watching you guys off and on all the different media, and just stoked that you're here. So I'm excited to talk to you guys.
Absolute pleasure.
Awesome. So tell you what, you guys, most people know you, so maybe just quick 10 seconds, 30 seconds on who you are and how you got into Bitcoin, and then we'll jump right into it. Go ahead,
the legend has to go first. Nico has to go first.
All right.
Well, you're too kind. First of all, Paul, thank you so much for having me. And yeah, man, I mean, look, 2016, didn't really like where I was in my life at the moment, like career-wise. And I was just kind of like looking at things and stumbled into Bitcoin, decided to go all in. And then one thing led to another. And 2020, I've always loved YouTube. I've always wanted to be a YouTuber. I grew up in that generation, and I had this decision to make. I was like, am I going to be a video game YouTuber, or am I going to do YouTube videos about Bitcoin? And I chose Bitcoin, and one thing led to another. We're simply evolved from this hobby to this podcast to this like media business, and one thing led to another. It's been a roller coaster ride, but it's life, man. It's extremely exciting, and like I said, very, very happy to be here.
Awesome.
Yeah, for me, I'm a ex-real estate, ex-gold, ex-equities investor who woke up to Bitcoin after calling it a scam for many years in 2020, and then aggressively started to panic that I didn't have enough. And then in 2020, I guess 2023-ish, decided to create a YouTube channel and try and help people like my parents who, when I look at it, they've done the right thing. They've built wealth and everything else for their two children and their future, and they were about to be rugged. So I thought, okay, let me try and see how many of those people I can help and try and get as many people to one Bitcoin as possible. That's been the mission.
Awesome, guys. So let's jump right into it about this one Bitcoin. And this fear of missing out. I think we all have that point, right? Where we just all of a sudden it clicks and you feel like, holy cow, I got to get as much as possible, as quick as possible. But now we're talking about like people getting 0.01, 0.1, one Bitcoin, retiring on one Bitcoin. British, we'll start with you. What do you see as sort of the importance of this one Bitcoin goal? Why is that the number?
Yeah, look, there's a lot of tree hugging that goes on, in my opinion, in Bitcoin, and I love helping people feel good and whatever else. But the reality is this, and this is the North Star that I believe people should have, which is unless you have one Bitcoin, a minimum of one Bitcoin, your job is not done. And I would rather people think about that than sit around, rest on their laurels and say, oh, I've got 0.1 Bitcoin, which, by the way, is going to make you wealthy, but it's not going to make you an incredibly wealthy. Let's say Bitcoin goes to $10 million. You got 0.1 Bitcoin. You're worth $1 million. Well, $1 million ain't shit today, let alone when Bitcoin is $10 million. So
that's a great point.
I want people to focus on that North Star. And if I'm the kick in the ass, they need to do that. And I'm willing to be that.
Right on. Nico, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, British Hodl does a phenomenal job, and I, as a fellow YouTuber, just a huge fan of his content. He's really able to get that message home and to really motivate people to get to that one Bitcoin number. It's hard. Right now, Bitcoin's at 108,000. That's the reality. I've been telling people to buy Bitcoin since it was under $1,000. It's crazy how much people just don't listen. Now this cycle with Wall Street getting involved and getting President Trump's rubber stamp of approval, the federal government's kind of getting into it. Now all of a sudden, my parents-in-law are listening, my parents are listening. My wife doesn't think I'm crazy, but I wouldn't say you're early anymore at this point. Like, you are on the verge of this thing going completely parabolic, because look at what's happening in Wall Street. Look at all the Bitcoin treasury companies. Like, look, the most powerful government on the face of the planet on July 22nd might announce that it has bought Bitcoin, or that it plans to buy Bitcoin. Like, that's the deadline that they set. That announcement was made yesterday, July 22nd. Imagine if in that announcement, it says, listen, we haven't bought some yet, but this is how we're going to do it in a budget neutral way. That's going to shock the world, right? So I completely agree. In terms of digital real estate that's completely scarce, try to get just one. You're going to be in the global elite. And just to kind of put that in perspective, there's 55 to 60 million millionaires all around the world. There's only 21 million Bitcoin, meaning if every millionaire right now on planet Earth wanted to buy one Bitcoin, they physically wouldn't be able to do so. And you're able to get into that elite club for $108,000. But as British Hodl said, you kind of have to get off your ass and really stack hard to get to that one Bitcoin. What is it, Hodl, that you say? I love your line, dude. It's phenomenal.
You mean the 3 rules of Bitcoin?
Yes, say it, bro. Say it. Drop it.
Step number 1, you buy Bitcoin. Step number 2, you shut the fuck up. And step number 3, you get fabulously wealthy.
There we go. Yeah.
That's the way that's so funny, man. I love that. But I also, at the same time, I have a couple of friends of mine, and we talk about what it used to be like in Bitcoin, where it's like every time there was news out, it was usually bad news for Bitcoin. And now when there's bad news out, it's like, it's good for Bitcoin. And so it's like no matter what shit is going down now, you just look at each other and like, fuck, we're just going to get wealthier. Holy shit, it's just going to get like, yeah, that sucks, but that means Bitcoin's going up. So it's for people that have, like what you said there, Nico, was it's late on the price, but what you described with the millionaires that don't own Bitcoin yet, and or the 98 or so percent of the population that don't own Bitcoin yet, it's still very early from a population basis. So if somebody's not sitting on $108,000 to smash buy Bitcoin, how did they get there?
Yeah, I mean, so I remember when I first got into Bitcoin, and again, I think it was just, I didn't like my career trajectory. I didn't like where I was economically. I took 80 to 90% of what I made from 2016 to about 2019. And then I took my foot off the gas pedal. I would wake up every single morning in sweats, basically like, how do I stack as much Bitcoin as humanly possible? And I stayed at my mom's house. I lived at my mom's house, no shame, don't care. And I sacrificed. I didn't go out. I didn't, party. I wish I started at an earlier age, to be honest with you. I was 23 at the time. I know Bitcoiners that are good friends of mine that started this at like 18, 19 years old, and they have, thousands of Bitcoin because they got in, in 2013 or 2012, right? So you kind of feel bad a little bit about the time where you go in, but I think Mahler said it best, right? Like, it really is an ego test, right? The class of when you get in, because it's like, okay, this person got in, like, I know someone that got in 2012, but is that going to stop me from getting in, even though, I got in 2016, 2017? Like, I might have less Bitcoin than him. That doesn't mean I'm not going to benefit economically from this technology, right? So my advice to anyone that's trying to get to one Bitcoin, like American Hodl, the other Hodl, right? There's British Hodl, there's American Hodl, right? Both are fantastic and fabulous. But what I would say is do whatever you can, right? 80 to 90% of your income, live at your parents' house, move to Central America, like cut your expenses as low as humanly possible, delay gratification for a little bit, for at least 4 or 5 years, and do whatever it takes to get to one Bitcoin, as British Hodl had said. Put in your focus on how to grow your income, focus on how to save, focus on not spending, and do it obsessively. And if you do it obsessively, I think you can get there, but you have to do it like very, very quickly, because the window's closing, right? We all know this. Like, you're not going to be able to get it at 100,000, 3 or 4 years from now. Impossible, right? So you have this very short window, this very short amount of time where if you focus your energy, as Michael Saylor says, and you stack and you take the majority of your income and you put it into Bitcoin, you have the opportunity to get to one, right? But all I could do is give give the advice of what I did in the first couple of years. Once I came to that realization, we all had this eureka moment in Bitcoin, right? I had it on the toilet, and I never forget it. I never forget what year it was. I think it was like 2017 or 2018 when I fully understood what this thing was, and I went like a psycho person, man. Like, I was just like, I have to dump as much of my money as possible into Bitcoin, because this thing is absolutely scarce and it's going to go up forever. And this was before there was any Bitcoin content. The only Bitcoin content that existed at the time was Andreas Antonopoulos. I would watch his lectures on repeat. And then the only other Bitcoin content was Max and Stacy when they were doing the Kaiser report for RT, right? There was nothing else. There was a bunch of altcoin channels. There was nothing. There was nothing Bitcoin only. But when you had that little snap in your mind and you're watching those Andreas lectures for the 5th or the 6th or the 7th time, and you're just getting chills and you're like, oh my God, this is so obvious. That's when, you get that mission. So that was a very long, winded rant, but to weave it back in, focus your energy on stacking as much Bitcoin as you can and try to get to one.
British, anything to add to that?
Yeah, look, it's great advice. And that's the one leverage point that somebody who doesn't have wealth has over someone who has wealth. So to put this into perspective of how difficult this is, I don't know many people that are millionaires, low single-digit millionaires, that have $108,000 of spare liquidity lying around to buy something that they don't understand, right? So really, it's probably like, I don't know, 0.3, 0.4% of the world that actually has the liquidity to do this, and they're not doing this. So if you are able to follow Nico's advice and actually hustle and secure your one Bitcoin, you are, elevating and transcending wealth levels that, you don't understand how much work it would have taken in the traditional sense in order to do that right now, if you could do that. Now, as far as my audience goes, my audience has the ability to secure one Bitcoin. They're arguably, they're even dumber because they're just choosing not to, because they're comfortable. And comfort, the good is the enemy of great at the end of the day. So what they're choosing to do is, I have a bunch of real estate and I'm not going to take advantage of it. Right now, you can go refi your real estate and go buy as much Bitcoin as you want if you have equity in that portfolio, of course. So that's what I did with my parents. They went and bought one Bitcoin for every property. It's now, secured through the ETFs. So it's, they don't have to worry about holding it. Again, innovation that wasn't around when I first started buying Bitcoin, even though I perceived myself as buying late. ETFs weren't around. There's so many easy things now, and it pisses me off because people are still not willing to take the time that it takes to learn and then execute. So you went through all this risk. You went to, my parents, immigrants, right? Went to a country, built their life again after being kicked out of my dad's family being kicked out of his country, built his life, et cetera, et cetera. And then at some point, you just kind of just slow down because you're comfortable. I've got real estate, I've got assets. They're all going up slowly but surely. And then you just get comfortable and someone has to come along and give you a kick in the ass to take it to the next level. And that's this kick in the ass. So if you're, I keep telling my audience, find the liquidity. You have it. You got equity in stocks, you got gold, you got real estate, you got assets, you got other things that you can use. to leverage and figure out. Like if you refi your property portfolio right now and buy Bitcoin with it, you're not even buying the Bitcoin, right? Because your tenants are paying for the Bitcoin. And so that's the way people need to think. But it really pisses me off because so many people are living in that comfort of having wealth, that they're not looking at, what's going to keep them wealthy. And one of my mentors always told me, like, getting there is easy. Staying there is the hard part. And that's what you have to do right now. So yeah, do I think they're going to do it? No. I think most people have missed the boat here, and that just is what it is. That's how, again, your history doesn't repeat itself, but it kind of rhymes. Like you've got this opportunity. There's going to be people who have watched every single Simply Bitcoin episode, every single British Hodl video, and they still haven't bought because they're just destined to be losers. And that's okay too.
Do you guys think that the price action in Bitcoin is a part of the reason why some people are unable to pull the trigger? Like they feel like either it's gone up too much or it's going to drop 70% and I'll pick it up cheaper. And then when it's dropping, they think, oh, it's dead. And then they don't end up buying. Like what, do they get whipsawed emotionally, or they just haven't done the work?
No, that might be, from my perspective anyway, that might be the lower end of the market. But as far as the higher end, they did this with real estate. They've been through this with equities. They've been through this. They're just lazy, right? And they're afraid to look at themselves in the mirror and just say, the hunger's gone, the drive is gone, I'm happy with my property portfolio, and that's it, right? Because I'll tell you one thing, the amount of messages I get from people who are executing, who are looking for HELOCs, who are looking for refinance, who are looking to pivot equities, who are looking to pivot their gold, is huge. It's immense. And those are the winners. Those are the people that are going to carry their wealth from this generation to the next. And everyone else is just going to be taxed away through either a wealth tax or inflation or whatever else, because they never deserved it in the first place.
So Nico, what do you think about this with this idea of like a big pivot coming, right? If everybody's sort of just starting to figure this out because all of a sudden there's a president that says it's good, there's corporations that say this is good, there's legislation coming out that says this is good. If this pivot is coming, and the vast majority of people haven't made this decision yet, is there a God candle on the horizon? Is this something that's just going to explode rapidly, you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now, what we've seen this cycle is compared to previous cycles, I would say it's the most bullish cycle from a news perspective, but from a price action perspective, I would say it's a little bit underwhelming. I mean, when Trump got into office, the price of Bitcoin was 109K. Right now it's at 108K 7 months later. I know we had a bit of a drop and we've recovered and all that. I think the reason that we're not seeing this kind of, and if you look up on Google Trends, by the way, what the overall kind of performance of Bitcoin is. I mean, the overall, how much people are searching for Bitcoin, it hasn't even surpassed 2021. It hasn't even surpassed 2017, right? So no one has any interest. No one has any idea about this happening like Wall Street does, and the Bitcoin treasury companies are getting a lot of attention. And what Saylor has done with strategy is like absolutely incredible. But retail, like just your average person, your average Joe, has no idea what is happening. And I think once you start to see, that realization come back, you're going to start to see, I think, a God candle, the likes of which has never been seen before. And the more we consolidate and the more we go sideways, the longer we go sideways, it's like a beach ball. Because if you look at the quantity of Bitcoin that these treasury companies are buying and the ETFs are buying, it's insanity. Like it's a very, very large amount. And by the way, this isn't just a phenomenon that's happening in the United States. This is an international phenomenon. Did you guys know that the Kingdom of Bhutan has 1/3 of their GDP in Bitcoin? Like it's insanity. And you just hear it. Treasury companies popping up in Sweden, treasury companies popping up in Europe, treasury companies popping up in Brazil. Like this is Canada. This is an international phenomenon that's happening in the traditional markets. And the way that I see it is they're using this debt-based system, they're leveraging it to buy something that has absolute scarcity, right? So it's like the sailor discovered the infinite money glitch. Everyone's looking at it and they're saying, hey, why can't we do this too? I mean, if they have access to cheap debt and they have access to these capital markets, I mean, look at the American capital market. I think it's like between like 50 or 60 trillion dollars in value. Like all of that could be tapped into. And Saylor actually did this amazing presentation. I covered it yesterday about the STRD, his new like product that he's releasing. And Saylor already is in the top 20 companies in terms of corporate treasury holdings. He's number 11, I believe. If Bitcoin 2x's or 3x's, his corporate treasury is going to be bigger than the likes of Apple, the likes of Microsoft. I think the only one that's going to be able to beat him is Berkshire Hathaway, that has like 400 billion or something like that. But all these other companies, they're just sitting on their hands. And is Saylor actually making a product? Like, is he going out there and producing the best GPU money could buy, NVIDIA? Is he producing iPhones, Macs? Is he actually making something? No, he's not doing anything. He's just sitting on a better asset than all these companies, right? And he's proving that to the rest of Wall Street. And I think it's just a matter of time. I would say by the end of this cycle, so by the end of Trump's second term, all of these companies are going to have some type of exposure to Bitcoin. And a lot of people forget Elon, which is part of the Big Seven, Tesla is part of the Big Seven. They have 10,000 Bitcoin they've been sitting on. They sold some, but they're still sitting on it. And I don't know if you guys saw that tweet by Elon yesterday. Him and Trump had a fallout where he was basically like, fiat is worthless. Like, fiat is worthless. Inflation is a form of taxation. So, this is happening whether people like it or not. And the beautiful thing about markets is that the more strategy performs on the public markets, it's going to force the hand of these other companies because their shareholders are going to say, hey, WTF, like this guy isn't even making anything. He's just putting his corporate treasury into Bitcoin. Like, why in the hell are you guys not doing this? This makes absolutely no sense. So it's just a matter of time, but that also creates an opportunity for everybody who's watching on the sideline. Because I think this is I agree with British Hodl. This is your last opportunity. I don't think you'll have this opportunity 4 years from now. I think the window will be closed. I think you're going to have to be okay with buying $500,000 Bitcoin or $400,000 Bitcoin. And that's going to suck. Like, that's going to be a very tough pill to swallow, right? So I think the window's closing.
One of the things that I spent a couple decades managing money for in TradFi. And one thing that you notice when you're doing that is that until Wall Street has their hands around something and a way to make money selling it, they don't promote it. And I feel like we're just at the very earliest stages of Wall Street starting to promote this. So like, you have the corporates buying it in their treasury, you have the ETFs, but you don't have the front end sales force out there putting it in every retail's portfolio. And you've got a seemingly like lack of retail involvement in this whole cycle. So I'm wondering, British, if you think that is what's coming next, is that once Wall Street really has their hands around this at a deep, deep level, if there's going to be a hype cycle and a promotion cycle coming, maybe even, in the next phase or soon, that really sucks retail back into this thing.
Yeah, one thing I want to point out is despite all of that, the fact that they haven't got their hands around it, IBIT, BlackRock their IBIT fund generates more business income for them than their S&P 500 fund. Mm-hmm. And that's before the front end sales team has got their ability to sell this product. So the incentives are lining up. If you're sitting there with wealth, one of the key skills you're supposed to learn is to be able to follow the incentives. And the incentives have lined up right now. And what's about to come next is lending on Bitcoin, the securitization of Bitcoin, the ability for banks to custody Bitcoin. And as that happens, and then of course, the front end asset managers. By the way, I know a ridiculous story. Let me share this with you guys. So I know two guys that are basically have their wealth managed by the same bank, right, in the US. And so they have two different advisors because one's worth $250 million, the other one's worth $7 million. The guy who's worth $250 million, by the way, advisor from the same bank, right? Just two different advisors. The $250 million advice is you need to allocate to Bitcoin, and the $7 million guy is not being told to allocate to Bitcoin at this point. So it's fascinating to me that that is even happening. But look, I think Wall Street is just about figuring its way out, figuring out how to actually sink its teeth into Bitcoin. And once they do that, this is going to be like real estate in the 70s, right? When they figured out mortgage-backed securities, that's when real estate really took off, because they just realized we can just print as much money as possible and shove it into housing and try and get as much debt into the hands of people as possible to pump up this asset. And they can do that with Bitcoin. And by the way, they don't need to worry about defaults. They don't need to worry about someone trashing the asset. They don't need to worry about, they don't need to worry about any social consequences that come with Bitcoin. And the beautiful thing about it is they don't need to convince anyone to buy the debt because everyone wants it, right? And they can shove it into the hands of a small number of people, which, by the way, this may actually be good for the world, because then real estate can normalize. We can actually have a deflation in real estate prices, or just, a normalization in real estate prices, if not a deflation. And it will make everyone's lives a lot better if Bitcoin is the asset that Wall Street decides to pump. And that's what I think is going to happen. The fact that Larry Fink is on interview with the lady at Davos and basically looks at her dead in the face and says, nobody should be surprised if Bitcoin is $700,000 a coin. Like, if you're sitting there and you hear that and you go, oh, maybe I should buy more real estate, you're just a moron. Like, you're just an idiot. Like, there's at some point, the beautiful thing about Bitcoin is that I realized when I first got into Bitcoin is that Bitcoin has had the biggest hearts of anyone in any investment I've ever met. And I've met people in equities, I've met people in gold, real estate, right? Bitcoiners have the biggest heart, because the reality is that when it comes down to this, nobody gives a shit about you. The only thing that matters is how much Bitcoin you have. This is not a human network. It's not a tree-hugging network. It's a monetary network. And what that means is how much you own dictates how much power you have. And so that's why, Wall Street's getting its teeth sunk into this. There's no promotion about it. There's nothing going on. And by the way, I said just wait until the ETFs are approved, because as soon as BlackRock gets into the game, suddenly Bitcoin's going to be good for the environment. It took 2 weeks. It took 2 weeks for a KPMG report to come out and say, suddenly Bitcoin's good for the environment. Right. So all of that is happening. It's about to start accelerating, and they will perp walk retail straight into Bitcoin as and when the infrastructure is ready. So right now you got an opportunity to front run all of that. But like Nico's been saying, it's not, you're at the tail end of this. This is not like you have, the next 5 years to figure this out. This is happening now. And when people are saying, that, oh, all of these things are happening, that's what we were saying I was saying in 2021, like, this is going to happen. This is fucking going on right now. That's how urgent this is. This is happening now. The president's talking about Bitcoin now. Larry Fink's talking about Bitcoin now. They're buying Bitcoin now. IBIT is generating more revenue than the S&P 500 fund now. So what's going to happen in the next 5 years?
I want to ask you guys what you think about the combination, because this is my favorite topic right now. The combination of the Big Beautiful Bill, the Genius Act, and Tether Global, distributing dollars all over the world. Like, what do you think that does to this cycle? British.
Yeah, I think that the US is about to use the digital dollar to basically condense power from 190 different central banks to like 4. I think it's a genius move if you are the United States and the Federal Reserve, et cetera, et cetera. I think it basically turns, and I had the pleasure of having dinner at Michael Saylor's house in 2021, thanks to my friend Eric Weiss, who orange-pilled Michael Saylor. And Michael Saylor told me this. The reality is you're going to see Bitcoin as perfect savings, and then digital US dollar as perfect currency. And that's exactly what I think is going to happen. Ever since he said that, that's been my focus. And I think Tether and I think USDC and all these stable coins are going to be great for the US because it's going to force people. It's going to create kind of a de facto, hard currency because these guys are using Bitcoin as a treasury asset. So it's like the US doesn't even need to go and hold Bitcoin and back the US dollar with Bitcoin because the digital version of the US dollar is going to do that anyway. And it's kind of sort of like going to back end the US dollar. And whenever in the next 20 years, 30 years, whatever that is, the US wants to move fully to a digital currency, it will already be there. It will be digital US dollar will be a harder currency than the US dollar. Think about that. And then eventually they can just pivot it.
Nico, what do you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, what I see with, and shout out to Senator Lummis and co for really passing forward the Genius Act, the Stablecoin Act in the United States, which really again further legitimizes the industry. We went from Operation Choke Point 2.0, getting beat up left and right, to a pro Bitcoin president, and now for the first time pro crypto, pro Bitcoin legislation. And what the Genius Act really did was basically, hey, Tether, you're fine, you're okay. Hey, USDC, you're okay, you're fine, you're okay. And what's happening internationally, what people don't realize, and I think Bitcoiners had this like idealistic view of looking at things, and it was always like, listen, in countries that have double-digit inflation, you're going to see this mass adoption of Bitcoin. That's not what's happening. It is happening. People are adopting Bitcoin as a non-sovereign alternative, but what is being adopted like on a viral level is the digital dollar. It is Tether. And what that is, it's a Trojan horse. And the reason it's a Trojan horse is because it gives people exposure to the banking, to an alternative to the banking system. So instead of them going to a bank account, going to a bank, submitting their documents, doing all this process, even in the US, it takes like an hour to like open a bank account. And a business bank account takes even longer than that. Now they could just download a wallet, whatever it is, and they could start receiving what they perceive as dollars, right? Of course, the US government is like, this is fantastic. Why? Tether is one of the largest treasury buyers in the world. It perpetuates their ability to continue money printing, really. And now they're essentially using stable coins to essentially propagate this worldwide, internationally. So it benefits the Tether people, which, by the way, are hardcore Bitcoiners. It benefits the US government because the Tether people are just buying US treasuries, which the US Treasury desperately needs. And then simultaneously, people are getting exposed to digital assets, which, by the way, is one stepping stone closer to Bitcoin. Why? Because if you are in Venezuela, where I'm originally from, or if you're in Argentina, what you perceive the dollar as gold. Like you see $100 bill, you're like, oh my God, this is fantastic. But it's a perception reality. It's not that $100 so much better. It's 100 times better than the Bolivar. But if you're an American, you realize you're like, hey, look, the dollar is still a scam. So when these countries eventually dollarize, and eventually they come to the same realization that us Americans have come to, which is like, hey, you know what? The dollar is not that terrible of a fiat currency, but still it's horrific and you're still losing your savings. They're going to come to the realization and say, hey, you know what? We've upgraded to the dollar. Now it's time to upgrade to Bitcoin, right? So I think, the TLDR is, I think stablecoins are a Trojan horse for Bitcoin. And I think down the road, it's just going to lead to mass scale Bitcoin adoption. And it's cutting away the barriers Forget about, buying Bitcoin with the traditional on-ramp from your bank account to your Bitcoin. No. You're going to be able to do it directly from the digital dollar, Tether, directly to Bitcoin. You're skipping the whole traditional financial system where there's a lot of it's they make it difficult for you sometimes, as you know, with the regulations.
I don't think even a lot of the Bitcoiners I've talked to about this, I don't think they fully have grasped how massive this is. I think and I don't know if this is like planned or just dumb luck on behalf of our government, but when I look at what happened when we took LIBOR away from London and we put the US on SOFR, and then we had USDT up in front of Congress, the Department of Justice, getting grilled for Bitfinex and Tether, and then they came out sort of unscathed. Maybe they got the blessing because they were buying, treasuries. When I put all those pieces together with where we are today with the Genius Act, it looks like to me like if I was the leader of a foreign country that didn't have a strong currency, I would be panicked. Like, we're done. Our currency is dead. Everybody in our country is going to adopt the dollar. Then what are you at that point, right? What are you really doing at that point? Are you just a part of the Western economic system by default? And as we inflate our dollar, we are going to inflate that into the whole world, right? That's going to be a game changer for the value of Bitcoin and the value of treasuries that I don't think anyone has really put a strong enough influence on yet. I think it's going to be massive. Yeah, to me, this is like might be driving the God candle. What do you think, British?
This move started after World War II, right? For the US, and this is like the culmination of this opera, because this is going to basically turn every foreign country leader, like you're basically like a department manager now,
right?
For the US, because your country is basically like doesn't give a shit about your currency, and if your currency is power, well, you have no power anymore. And now the power is basically centralized in the United States, and we can do monetary policy everywhere in the world with a click of a button. The thing that Nico said that was very important was that you're basically circumventing the financial industry. But the reason why it's going through is that you're circumventing the financial industry without circumventing the United States. And that's why it's being supported by the government. That's why, because the banks have been a pain in the ass to the government as well. So what they're basically trying to do is trying to rug the banks, rug everyone, so that they can centralize power at the Federal Reserve here, and the U.S. Treasury. And that's why it's being supported, because Tether allows that to happen. Right. And this actually, if you're sitting there going, okay, like, for example, I'm now considering, now that Tether's moved its headquarters over to El Salvador, El Salvador just became a much bigger player than it ever was, because now that's fully protected by the US. Not only are we housing, prisoners paid for by the US there, but now the main buyer of US treasuries is now housed in El Salvador. El Salvador is a fully protected state by the US at this point, as far as I'm concerned. That's if they don't move their headquarters to the US at some point, which they may be demanded to. But the reason why this is working is because it's pro-USA, and this solidifies US power against BRICS coming up, all these other things that are coming up. BRICS is going to be taken apart. All the news cycles about how great the BRICS was, that's all going to be taken apart with tariffs. This is guaranteeing American supremacy for the next 100 years, and it's a fantastic opera to watch, because it's an instant rug, like you said. It's why the EU is clamoring for a digital currency as quick as possible. Yeah. It's why they're all doing it. Because at the end of the day, the world is about to be dollarized, and you're about to rug power from all of these other countries that thought they were going to get smart against the US. And I always found it fascinating when I hear people talk about how this rising power of China is going to do this, that, and the other. It's like, well, 85% of world trades in US dollars. And if you're telling me that the US doesn't have the ability to finance, by the way, the US backed by British financial institutions as well, because we're pretty much in there as well. It's like, if you don't think these Western powers have the ability to rug everyone else in an instant, you don't know how powerful the US dollar has become. And we're about to get a front row seat to that. And the beautiful thing about it is it's going to be backed by Bitcoin.
Yeah, well said. Nico, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think British Hodl hit the nail on the head. This is dollar supremacy worldwide. They essentially have figured out using the stablecoin, you know, stablecoin tech basically to essentially dollarize the world. And British Hodl said something like on point. This is why Europe is freaking out. They're having a freak out right now. They're basically saying, like, look, this is a threat to our sovereignty. In a way, like, that's true, but also in a way, it's like, instead of reacting like, kind of market driven, like, this should, I should look within myself as to why people want the dollar, right? They double down on this kind of top down, let's just force people into CBDCs using coercion and hope that people, to use Christine Lagarde's own words, hope that people don't use the escape valve, right? And it's terrifying to them. It's terrifying to them because that gives the U.S. government a tremendous amount of power over these European countries. Now, where I think they're kind of miscalculating is this: what's happening is money for the first time is experiencing free market forces, right? So before, it was just a monopoly. Like, if you lived in Venezuela, if you lived in Argentina, you were essentially forced by the government. They tried to, right? But you were essentially forced, here, you have to use the Bolivar. Of course, there was black markets and stuff. But what Tether allows is, it allows anyone with a smartphone to basically get access to dollars, right? So even if you're in Europe, and you're a merchant, right? And for whatever reason, the euro is experiencing some type of inflation. As the merchant, you're going to just say, you know what? I got to run my business. I got to put food on the table for my family. Like, I'm sorry, I'm just not going to trust the dude on TV with the suit telling me it's your patriotic duty to use the local currency. I'm not going to believe you. If I have an alternative to use a currency that's stable, that allows me to be able to run my business, I'm not going to listen to you. And that's why a lot of these bureaucrats are freaking out. It's the movie quote, I know it's a little bit cliche. It's like, they can't handle the truth, right? Like, these are people that are used to, they've had so much power that they've been able to define what money is. What they forgot is that the market defines what money is. It doesn't matter how much authority you have as the Bank of International Settlements or as the European Central Bank. Fundamentally, at the end of the day, the people on the ground are going to get to determine what is the better money and what money they want to use. And the more coercive you become, the more totalitarian you become and try to force people into using a money they don't want to use. We have a great example of that, Paul, right here off the coast of South Florida. What happens in Cuba? People literally risk their lives to get on a raft to go and seek freedom. What happened between West Berlin and East Berlin? What happened? People were willing to risk their lives and jump a wall to seek freedom. So coercion doesn't work. And that's the only tool they have left in order to try to force people into using a money they don't want to use.
That's interesting. I'm glad you brought that up, because we were having a discussion the other day at work about how to maybe get dollars across that wall. And we think that there's a future where AI agents are hiring humans to do tasks and paying them in USDT or Bitcoin. Right? If you need something done on the boots on the ground in Argentina and you're a global AI agent that's running some business, you might have them open up a wallet and send them USDT, and that those dollars get delivered globally that way.
I
as opposed.
want to just add something here because there's a
Yeah.
massive education going on in Europe right now, which Americans might not be aware of, which is 16,500 millionaire plus, or above millionaire and above, are about to leave the United Kingdom this year, because the government has just made terrible choices in terms of tax law and everything else. This is extremely important because do you think that they would rather have US dollars in a digital format to leave with? Do you think, because remember, right, in the UK, one of the tax laws things is like I can leave, not a problem. I don't have to pay an exit tax like I have to in the US. But if I own real estate, which is where the majority of the wealth of people in the United Kingdom is, if I own real estate, that real estate is still taxed in the UK. Do you think those people want something like Bitcoin that they can just leave with now that they've realized that their government is basically going to make the worst choices possible? You got two educations happening here at the same time in the UK, for example, for the wealthiest class, which is I need to get out of real estate and I need to look for an alternative, and I can't trust the British pound, right? Because the government's made bad choices with how that works. So you've got two education sources here for the wealthiest class in the UK, and they're all going to at some point be educated on Bitcoin and on the digital US dollar. And this is happening everywhere across Europe right now. So yeah, if I was the EU at this point and the UK government, I would start shitting myself. And they are, because you can see what type of actions they're taking to do capital controls. And if they don't open up those markets real quick and start getting, better on taxes, you're going to see assets just flood. You're already seeing. I was just in London for 4 days, and I'm speaking to people that are telling me there's in Knightsbridge, which is like equivalent to Manhattan, let's say, in New York, you're already seeing 50% write-downs as people are trying to flee the UK on real estate, and that's in those areas. So this is happening. This is happening, increasingly. The US is going to be the biggest benefactor. I would argue, I would just say one thing that's quite hilarious. Nico said something that I truly believe in, which is the market dictates the money. Right now, the U.S. is going to dictate what the money is, and at least the U.S. is saying that the U.S. dollar and Bitcoin are money. So that's good right now.
Yeah. Okay, so I got to ask this question then, because everything that we're talking about is pointing towards just persistent demand and need from a use case perspective, right? Not just to get wealthy, but just like real world use cases of preserving your wealth, fleeing a country, seeking freedom, avoiding inflation. In your opinion, British, does that mean that the 4-year cycle is done? Or do you think we're still in it?
Yeah, I'm not. I'm increasing. I've started saying this in 2024, but I'm increasingly not on the God Candle team. However, the caveat that I'll put on that is you may see what looks like a God Candle, but it's really like an S curve. I've always been on the S curve side, rather, with all these models and things that have come out. Like the S curve just makes the most amount of sense to me, where you have like one moment or one short period of time where there is just a saturation event of capital moving into this asset. I can see that happening, but I'm not on the 4-year cycle team, which is, I would love to be proven wrong, but I just don't see the incentive line up. Like, I don't know why BlackRock would want, an asset that they get $100 billion into to quadruple in 3 months and then crash 80% for 4 years. Like, that just incentives wise doesn't make any sense. And they've got all the tools now to buoy that market up as well, because you just call your bond desk and say, give Michael Saylor $30 billion. And now suddenly you got a floor in the market, right? So I'm not on that team, but I would love to be proven wrong.
Okay. Nico, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that Saylor's made a very strong case regarding the CAGR moving forward. What he expects it to be, at 50%, then it going down to 20%. I think we are in completely uncharted territory since the ETFs were approved in the beginning of 2024, in January of 2024. And now that Wall Street and institutional money is in, you look at the price action, right? This isn't retail smash buying Bitcoin anymore. This is smart money buying Bitcoin, meaning if you want to buy $500 million worth of Bitcoin, you don't want the price to go up 20%. So you're going to do it in a way where, and I don't want to say stealth, but basically stealth. You're going to do it in a way that's not going to move up the price. The thing is, though, you could only do that for so long until you get that eventual, supply shock, so to speak, right? I've seen a lot of the reasons, and I don't buy a lot of them. I think it's half and half in my perspective. But a lot of people this cycle are basically saying like, look, like nothing weird is going on. The reason that, this current cycle is acting different is because of the reason I just mentioned, right? But also the OGs that bought Bitcoin under $100 are now selling a lot of that Bitcoin when it's at 100,000. They've made a fantastic return. These are people that got in under 100. They're selling at 100,000. They want to upgrade their lifestyle. I buy a little bit of that, but I don't buy all of it. I think also what you're starting to see, and this might be an unpopular opinion, is I think there's paper Bitcoin. I think there's paper Bitcoin around, and I think that there's no way to verify it. I didn't like the response that Michael Saylor gave at the Bitcoin conference, or Mitchell Hodl, another Hodl, asked him basically, hey, why don't you make your reserves public? And then Saylor basically said, for security reasons, and this is why look, I don't have experience in the traditional markets like Michael Saylor does. He's a very smart guy, right? But Paolo literally copy pasted the Tether reserve address on X, and you literally see 94,000 Bitcoin. And then the country of El Salvador literally has their treasury public. And I believe Jack Mahler said that 21 was going to make the reserve public. So, I'm sure there's ways to kind of verify it on chain. They can't make too much paper Bitcoin. It's not going to make sense after a while. But I think that there is some rehypothecation going. I think there is some paper games that are happening in the back end. So, like a long-winded answer to your question, I think we might see a 4-year cycle this cycle, but moving forward, I think those days are gone. I think those days are over, in my opinion.
British, you said you'd like to be proven wrong. What you sounds like you would prefer to see the 4-year cycle persist. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, because if we see, volatility creates opportunity. So, from my perspective, with the experience that I have in the markets, if we saw a run up and then a dip of 80%, now that we have the tools like MSTR and put options and things like that, it could be a really good opportunity to do that. I just don't think that's really going to happen, and I don't think it lines up with the incentives of BlackRock. I will add one other thing where I think, the argument of paper Bitcoin being in the market suppressing the price, I personally don't agree with that. However, I will give you something that kind of looks like paper Bitcoin to me that is actually suppressing the price. And one of the things that I've been surprised about is how long I put some videos out, said there's going to be a rotation of holders at 100,000 as this institutional market gets in, with these old school holders, Bitcoin OGs, and then now this new buyers. Now, there is a phenomenon going on, because I speak to a lot of these people, where OG Bitcoiners are now realizing that there is this Bitcoin treasury opportunity. So a lot of people are selling their Bitcoin to convert to Bitcoin treasuries. But the problem with that is, when you're buying some of these Bitcoin treasuries at a 7x MNAV, you've basically got a seventh of the Bitcoin being put back into Bitcoin, right? And so you're creating a price suppression, quote unquote, price suppression effect because of these Bitcoin treasuries. Because if you give them $100 and you've got a 5x MNAV, they're only putting $20 back into Bitcoin, right? And I think that is causing a price suppressive effect. And that's kind of like a paper Bitcoin effect that's going on. Like, I personally, when I speak to people about Bitcoin treasury and they ask me, what are you holding? I'm like, well, I'm holding MSTR, and I've probably got less than 0.5% of my net worth in any of these other Bitcoin treasury companies. Because I just don't see the advantage. If you've got locked capital, like if you're in Japan and you've got a retirement account and number one, there's no ETFs. Number two, you cannot put Bitcoin into your retirement account. And number three, if you buy Bitcoin, there's a 55% potential tax on the capital gain of that. Then maybe it's worth buying a 7x MNAV exposure, right? Because now you've got to basically look at that like a bond product or a commercial real estate product and just bid up the NAV until you get your 15 or 20% annual compound. But to actually like sell my Bitcoin, so this is what I don't agree with. I've been cussing out people on Twitter doing this. You have Bitcoin. I'm going to sell my Bitcoin. I'm now going to buy MSTR at a 2x MNAV, right? And then because MSTR isn't moving, within 4 weeks, I'm going to dump my MSTR at a 1.8x MNAV and now buy Metaplanet at a 6x MNAV, right? You're diluting your Bitcoin so much that like you're going to need one of these things to go up 20x just to make back your original Bitcoin position if you are on a Bitcoin standard, which is what I judge my holdings at. Bitcoin to me is the new zero, right? It's the new baseline. So, that's what I think is going on. That's causing a price suppressive effect in the market. But the good news is that will clear out at some point. And the only capital, in my opinion, going into these treasury companies should be locked capital. I don't think anyone who's got the opportunity to access, got the opportunity to access an ETF, got the opportunity to access tax-free Bitcoin holdings, et cetera, should be putting that capital into these treasury companies unless you're willing to hold for 10 years, right? So I converted some of my ETF holdings into MSTR because I just looked at it as a 10-year hold scenario. And in that scenario, it will make up the MNAV difference that I paid.
Do you guys, the only other thing I want to add to that is that it seems to me like a lot of the corporate strategies, individual high net worth, are on this phase of I need to accumulate as much Bitcoin as possible. And they're using options and futures markets to run accumulation strategies where they're selling puts and calls, getting the income and using that to buy more Bitcoin. Do you think that bracketing around these price channels is keeping the price suppressed artificially for longer than normal? As opposed to people, back in the retail days, people were they didn't have all these derivative options. It was just you just buy and hold, buy and hold, buy and hold.
Yeah, I think derivatives in any market is gonna have a suppressive quality. But the beautiful thing, as Nico's mentioned with Bitcoin, is you can only do that for so long, right? Mm-hmm. Because at some point the Bitcoin runs out, and at that point you're gonna see a step function up on the Bitcoin price. So yeah, I think options in any market is designed to create some stability in the market and make the markets more efficient, which I think they are doing. But with Bitcoin, at some point, whenever that rotation finishes, you're going to see a
breakout move up. Yeah, for sure. So with this in mind, where do you guys see Bitcoin by the end of 2025 and by the end of 2026? Put you on the spot, time and price. Go ahead.
Oh,
Nico.
man. That's a great question. So I think,
crystal ball.
Bitcoin tends to do the exact opposite of what everyone expects. And what I'm seeing this cycle is everyone on Bitcoin Twitter is basically saying 150K, 200,000, right? And that's not how markets work, right? Like, if the general consensus is 150K to 200,000, like we're not probably going to end up at 150K or 200,000. So we're either going to underperform, meaning we're going to hit 120 and that we peaked and whatever, and then kind of go sideways and this and that, or we go above that, right? Generally what tends to happen in every single cycle is the year after the halving tends to be the most parabolic. It tends to be the most explosive. Is Bitcoin going to continue that pattern? So far for the first half of the year, it absolutely has not followed that pattern at all whatsoever, right? But the fact that we're consolidating at $108,000 and like no one's like batting an eye and everyone's treating this as if it's normal, there's nowhere else to go but up, right? And I wouldn't be surprised if this is some type of extended bull market. So I wouldn't be surprised if we kept running up into 2026 or the first half of 2026 at this point. It seems like everything is just taking twice as long. But I think Bitcoin's sitting in a very, very powerful position from a regulatory environment, from a Wall Street perspective, from a retail perspective. The things that you're going to be able to do, use your Bitcoin as collateral. Those products haven't even been fully built out yet, and that's so freaking exciting. Like, I don't know if you guys saw the news regarding Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, right? That you're going to be essentially allowed to list Bitcoin as an asset in order to get a mortgage. Like, for my generation, holy cow, like, that's incredible. That's fantastic. That's fabulous. So, I think we're at the tip of the iceberg in terms of where Bitcoin's going to go. But, to answer your question, because that was a very long-winded answer, but to answer your question, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Bitcoin over 200,000 this year, but I also wouldn't be surprised if we only saw 120K. But for the next 4 years, I'm highly confident we'll be at the end of Trump's term, we'll be at $500,000 to $1 million Bitcoin.
British?
Yeah, I think we're entering a decade-long cycle here where Bitcoin sort of gets to around $5 million a coin in 10 years. Now, for a short, 2025, 2026, I think that, well, there's going to be some kind of saturation moment here because of all this capital just finding its way into Bitcoin. And then I wouldn't be surprised if the average price that we get to is somewhere in the $400,000 to $500,000 range for this 4-year window until the next halving.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. All right, guys. Last question. I want to find out from you all, what's the most exciting thing you're seeing in Bitcoin right now that we haven't talked about on this podcast? British, we'll start with you.
Absolutely nothing. There's nothing that has been exciting for Bitcoin since June 15th, 2023, which was the most exciting day since Bitcoin came out, which
what was June 15th, 2023?
BlackRock's application for ETF. That
Okay.
is it. I know there's going to be Bitcoiners that are like dopamine addicted rabbits that are looking for something new to happen. I've been saying this since then. This is the most exciting thing that's happened to Bitcoin. It's going to be the most exciting thing that's happened to Bitcoin for the next 10 years because I understand downstream effects, and BlackRock is the biggest downstream effect to come for Bitcoin. And ever since then, what have you seen? You've seen the entire, C-suite of the U.S. government move to pro-Bitcoin. If you think is respectfully to your senators, if you think they're smart enough to sit there and go, oh, I just understood Bitcoin because I read the Bitcoin Standard, you got something else coming, right? These are the same people that are like trying to fund wars around the world and happy about people dying and this, that, and the other. They're not geniuses, right? They've been told that Bitcoin is your next positive thing that you're talking about. That's my conspiracy side of way of thinking. And so they're dancing to the tune. So that's happened. Bitcoin's good for the environment. There's going to be 700 corporations that own Bitcoin. It's like nation states owning Bitcoin. The U.S. has a Bitcoin strategic reserve coming up. All of this happened after June 15, 2023. That should be the date that's like tattooed on you because that was the most important date for the institutionalization of Bitcoin.
Nico.
Yeah, I mean, what has me the most excited is we've won. Like we won basically. This last election cycle was crucial for Bitcoin from a regulatory perspective. We were being attacked as an industry, Paul. I'm sure you know this. It was death by 1,000 regulatory cuts, and they were openly hostile towards our industry. You could make an argument that certain banks were literally assassinated, because they had they had dealings with the digital asset space, right? So they poked the bear, and all of a sudden it galvanized our industry to throw our hat in the political ring, and we got President Trump elected. And in DC, if you're not in the room, you're not in the deal. We are in the room now. The White House just had a crypto summit. They had the biggest players of the industry literally in the White House surrounding the president, tweeting from the White House account. We want the United States to become the Bitcoin capital of the world. It's not crypto. It's a Bitcoin capital of the world. Then you have Larry Fink, the world's largest, the chairman, CEO, or whatever, literally the world's largest asset manager. They own a piece of every freaking company on the S&P 500, basically going on CNBC saying, hey, you know what? Satoshi was a good guy. This Bitcoin thing is great. Like, what else can you want, right? Like, I picture Elizabeth Warren right now. Like, this is defeat. This is an L. Like, I don't know how you recover from this, because once Bitcoin gets into the traditional financial system, which it's doing, and it's like, it's like this bottom up, once it kind of infects it, and I say that in a good way, it's going to be political suicide to try to go up against it, regardless of whether you lean left or right. And you're seeing this all over, like all 50 states have bills that are trying to introduce strategic Bitcoin reserves. There's some states that even passed regulations that protects the right to self-custody, protects the right to mine, right? Like, we've won. This is what winning looks like. Like, the other side, like, if anything, they're fighting in retreat, but it's a lost cause. Like, if you're at the Bank of International Settlements, if you're, the European Central Bank, if you're Christine Lagarde, like, okay, you're going to put up a fight, but the United States of America is basically saying, listen, Bitcoin is here to stay. I don't know if you guys caught the press conference the other day with Trump, but Trump was basically like, yeah, Bitcoin takes pressure off the dollar. Like, we won already. For 4 more years, that's what's going to happen. You give 4 years of Bitcoin to do its thing, and entrench itself. It's not going anywhere. And it's going to force all those other countries like Russia and China to change their stance on Bitcoin, because if they don't, they get left behind. China's using Hong Kong as a proxy. So they're using Hong Kong to get exposure to the American capital markets, right? And then Russia, there's some news coming out of Russia called their equivalent of Congress is called the Duma. And there's a representative that was basically saying, hey, we should launch a strategic Bitcoin reserve too, right? And then Putin changed his mind on mining. So Russia is mining Bitcoin as well, right? And do you think China is changing their mind and Russia's changing their mind out of the goodness of their heart? No, they see the United States and they're like, dude, we cannot get left behind, right? So we're winning, and that's what has me the most excited.
That's awesome. You guys have been awesome. Thank you so much for spending an hour with me and sharing your thoughts. You guys have got me so positive and pumped up for the future. I appreciate it. You want to tell everybody where to find you, British?
Just go to YouTube, go to X, type in British Hodl, and look for this mug.
All right. Nico, we know how to find you, but we'll go ahead and give us your list.
Yeah, just search simply Bitcoin anywhere and you'll be able to find us.
Awesome. Guys, like and subscribe. Come on back for other podcasts in the future. Hopefully this group will get together again in the future. Love you guys. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, gents.
So you've heard Bitcoin is the new gold rush by now. As world leaders on all sides have endorsed it as the future of money, and now you're looking to get started, we'll show you how. It's actually easier than you think. First, go to your nearest Byte Federal ATM and turn your cash to coin. Byte Federal has over 1,200 locations around the country with the highest daily limits. Go to our website, bytefederal.com, to find the nearest ATM to you. Log in to any wallet, then create an account, deposit your US cash, and instantly convert it to Bitcoin. That's it. We are the only US manufacturer and operator in the Bitcoin ATM industry, and our US-based live customer service is second to none. Go on, give it a whirl, and don't get left behind. Click the link below.